Hello, hello. Welcome back to this week's episode of Behind the Workflow. My name is Simona Costantini.
And I'm Tally Mallow.
And today we are joined by a really fun guest. You're going to just love her because her name is Andi Smiley, but she actually is so smiley. And honestly, I wanted to ask Andi, is that your real last name? Is that really your last name? Because, what an incredible last name to have. But Andi is the founder and the host of the Friendly Podcast Guide, a show and coaching brand helping women, especially busy moms, build and grow podcasts that fit real life, which is so important. She's passionate about helping podcasters simplify their systems, grow sustainably, and use Pinterest and SEO. So we're going to dive into a lot behind Pinterest and SEO today to get discovered long after an episode airs. Andi started her business as a creative outlet while raising 3 kids, and it turned into a thriving brand that teaches how to replace algorithm anxiety with search-driven growth. Now, this is a really important conversation today because there's so much talk about SEO, LLMO, how to reach your audience long after your social media post hits. So I know you're going to find a lot of value in today's conversation. Before we dive any further, I want to share with you a quick shout out to the show's sponsor, which is Northflow, obviously. If you are juggling Google Docs, task lists, and calendar chaos, there is a better way, and it's Northflow. Northflow brings your content planning, production stages, and collaboration into one smart workspace, so your team is always on the same page. So now that I've talked for 75 minutes, Andi, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And truly, Smiley is my maiden name. So I did grow up with Smiley as my maiden name. So I wanted to keep it for professionalness because why not?
That's amazing. And honestly, it's memorable and it makes you stand out. So I absolutely love that. So yeah, for those.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So for those who may not know you yet or may have not met you yet, what is the Friendly Podcast Guide all about and how did it come to life?
So the Friendly Podcast Guide actually started, like you said, as a creative outlet. I had just had my 3rd baby and I'd been thinking about starting a podcast for 5 years. It had been a minute. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. So I had a newborn and I started my podcast, and it was actually the first rendition of the Friendly Podcast Guide was helping moms find podcasts for themselves and for their kids. Because I'm very passionate about podcasts being a great way for moms to feel less lonely and to learn things in a way that is easier for them. I still am passionate about that, and I want to bring it back somehow in some way someday. But a year and a half ago, I realized that trying to do podcast coaching and run a podcast that wasn't about podcast coaching was too much for me as a mom of 3 littles. And so I merged the two, and now my podcast helps women grow their podcast in a sustainable way. Specifically, my 2 main favorite ways are Pinterest, SEO. I guess there's 3, and podcast swaps, like guesting and stuff like that.
Nice. So what first drew you to Pinterest? I haven't really seen a lot of podcasters using Pinterest. So I'm curious, what made you take that leap and start going that route?
So truly, the first businessy group that I joined, she talked the coach, she talked about Pinterest for business and how it's such a great tool for business owners. And at the time I still had my podcast that was helping moms find podcasts. So I was like, well, that's not really a business, but I still want moms to find podcasts. So how am I going to do that? And Pinterest was a really great way. So Pinterest, first of all, from a selfish standpoint, Pinterest is awesome because I can schedule out a month's worth of pins and then be hands off for an entire month. I don't have to open the app. I don't have to check in on stories on Instagram. I feel like Instagram, you kind of have to babysit, while Pinterest doesn't care if you're there or not, as long as you've scheduled your pins, which hallelujah, amen. I love that part of Pinterest. The other side of it, why it's really good for podcasters, is Pinterest users are different from other social media users. Pinterest users are there to take action. They're there to learn, and they are planning on leaving the platform, while on Instagram or TikTok, they're there to be entertained, and Instagram and TikTok don't really want you to leave the app, right? They're trying to keep you there. So there's a lot of reasons I love Pinterest, but those are the 2 main ones for why it's super great for podcasters.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like every time I go to Pinterest, it's usually for a recipe or to look a craft that I'm never gonna do. But if I had a link to something I want to watch, I've done that route before where I went there for something, got distracted, found a YouTube link, went on YouTube, and then I never went back to Pinterest. So interesting.
It's so
Yeah.
true. That's such an interesting point. And okay, so I used to use Pinterest religiously all the time for promoting my podcast, and not just my podcast, but like, freebies, free guides, links to website, like all the things. And we had a pin go viral on my podcast launch guide. Oh my gosh, we had like hundreds of thousands of impressions. I was like, this is crazy. I felt like Jenna Kutcher for a hot minute. I was like, oh my God, I'm like, look at me go, look at me go. But you know what it was? So I realized afterwards that we had put paid ads behind it. Like we put some spend behind it, which was totally fine. It was part of the strategy. And then it linked to an old link. And then I couldn't change any of the links. So, what do you recommend if you're using Pinterest? Let's say someone has their podcast, they have a podcast website, or they're using like a placeholder website for right now, and then they change links. Like, how do you manage that?
So there are a lot of different ways you can do it. Um,
You're like, where do
if
I
there
begin?
I was gonna say, here are like two like overarching things you can do. One thing you can do is I'm pretty sure now, if I'm remembering correctly, you can change a link on a pin. Like I think they've changed that. I can double check that
Mm.
though. The second one I would say is if there aren't that many pins that are going to that link, you can just delete those pins. Then you're not even having to worry about it. If there's a lot of them, then I would have some sort of a redirect from that link to either something else or maybe just your homepage. But those are kind of like that's what I recommend to people when that kind of a thing comes up.
That's really smart. That's a good idea. I'll have to take a
Simona, that's it, your actionable item. You need
I
to
know,
go
literally.
back to Pinterest and change that link to a new guide.
I love it. Let me add even more things on my plate. No, I'm just kidding. You know
Right.
what,
I
though?
hear
It's all
you.
worth it because the actual reach of Pinterest is really good. And like you were saying just a little bit before, is that all these other platforms, they're great. I mean, every platform serves its purpose, right? And every type of audience is on a different platform with a different outcome, and there's a different strategy behind it, right? But to have something
1000%.
that's kind of like set it, forget it, you just load your stuff in, you don't have to really check on it a whole lot. Maybe once a month, twice a month, you're checking in, is really low. It's low bar, and it gives you quite a bit of reach, which is pretty fantastic. What would you say to the people who think that it's oversaturated, there's so many pins, too much content, so on?
I would say that sounds like an excuse. I feel like people say that about everything, right? Like people say that about podcasts, but in reality,
True.
you have a specific thing that you are talking about and someone needs to hear it. Actually, a lot of someone's most likely. So, your content will find the people that need it and then they will like it, they will follow you and they will fall in love with your podcast and then you'll be able to help them and probably make some money along the way.
Mhm.
Awesome. That's a good advice. As always, keep going. Don't stop. Just do it.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, can you walk us through your Pinterest workflow, like from an episode idea all the way to the time you have it all up on social media? Where do you fit Pinterest in? If you just want to walk us through the whole workflow, would love to hear that.
I Y'all, I love my podcast workflow, which sounds so weird, but I do love it. I have like it's like written out on my desk. But here's like a broad strokes version. So if I have my idea, I write it out. I usually do bullet points because when it's a script, then I just read it and I sound like a robot, which we're
Yeah.
trying to avoid. So
Yeah.
I record it, I edit it, do all of that stuff. Then it's up on the platform. It's up on my hosting platform. From there, I make my blog post that usually, I mean, when I'm like all cut up, I will make the blog post the day after the episode drops. If not, it'll be the week after because, life. And then as soon as my blog post is made, I make three pins same day and I schedule them out on my Pinterest just so that I have at least three. And then I'll use
Can I ask, Andy, what type of
yeah.
pins do you put? Are you using like video pins? Are they quotes? Are they like something else?
Good question. So those first three ones that I do are usually like basic. Like I need to make sure that this content is out in Pinterest world. So they're usually static. They usually have some sort of hook. I try to add a number in there because numbers I've noticed, like if it's 3 things that you can do to grow your podcast, that's a really lame one. I'm not good at coming up on things on the spot, but
That's okay.
like add a number in there.
It's practical though. People would search it. People would search it.
You're not wrong. So usually it's static. There's usually a picture of me on there, and some sort of hook that will link back to the episode. So that's the basic. Those are my 3. And then I will always go back. My goal, so right now I have one pin go out every day. That's how I have it done. If you're just starting Pinterest though, when I first started, I did 1 pin a week. Like I just was trying to get myself into the habit. And even that, I had a pin go viral, with just having 1 pin go out a week.
Wow.
I think I was like 2 months in and one of my pins went viral. I was like, oh, hi. Okay, cool. This is fun. So slowly I've built up. So now I'm 1 pin a day. But right now I just got back from vacation. So I'm like, I think I only have a week's worth of pins right now. But like, it's just really nice to have like that buffer. And so yeah, 3 pins, they're usually static. They're usually the basics. And then I will go back and I do a couple of videos because videos, I'm not going to lie, videos are hit or miss. I feel like videos used to be like the surefire way to get more visibility. And in my experience, that's not so much the case anymore, which is kind of a bummer, but it's just another way to make a pin that people will be interested in. And then I
In some
also
ways, that's kind of good though. Because
Yeah.
like not everyone does video and not everyone likes video. Not everyone is comfortable on video. So it's kind of nice to know that you can still have a presence on Pinterest and have low bar content that doesn't take hours and hours and hours to make, especially if you create a whole bunch of templates in advance and you just like plug them in. It makes
Totally.
your workflow way faster.
It's true. Well, and truly, I will say the video pins that do well on Pinterest are not talking heads. Like you talking on Pinterest, because most of the time it's muted. So no one knows what you're saying unless you have captions, and most people aren't going to sit and read that's too much effort.
Yeah,
So
no.
I would say B-roll plus something over the top is the best kind of video for Pinterest. And then I usually use an AI chatbot to help me make the pin titles and the pin descriptions, and I tell them the SEO keywords that I want it to use. And then I upload them to Pinterest. That is, and that's funny that took a minute to say, and that's like the broad strokes version, but yes.
I mean, I did interrupt you twice. Okay, let's be honest.
Valid.
Do you also when you link your podcast or when you share whatever link you're sharing on Pinterest, are you always linking it to your blog or do you link it to like a YouTube video or Apple directly or Spotify directly? Like, is there a science to that?
Good question. Okay, so in a perfect world, you're going to want to link to your website that you own. Pinterest likes websites that you own, and you can put when you're setting up your Pinterest profile, you can add your website and get it like it's not approved, but like they're like, oh, this is yours.
Verified.
There you go. Thank you. That's the word. You get your website verified, and then Pinterest is like, oh, this is yours. Then I'm going to push these pins further. That's what Pinterest says in their like best practices. But I've also Pocket Cast is my favorite internet player. So when I don't have a blog post up yet, that's where I will link. YouTube is another really good one though. If you're trying to grow your YouTube channel, obviously, you're probably going to want to link to your YouTube at least sometimes.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
So you juggle motherhood, coaching, and also content creation and make sure that you have all your pins out. How do you delegate parts of your workflow? Like, are you currently working with different people that you have to delegate parts of your workflow? And if you do, like, how do you do that? And also, what do you still prefer to handle yourself?
So truly, businessy stuff, I pretty much do it all currently. I do like chatbots are my best friend for the moment. I have had a VA in the past, but honestly, it was just not working for me. Like, she
Mm.
wasn't it just wasn't the best fit, and so I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna make sure I have everything lined up the exact way I want to before I try a VA again." But I will say I delegate so much in the, like, caregiving motherhood part of my life. Like, I used to do all of the laundry, which looking back, like, is insane for a family of 5. So, about a year ago, I went to my partner, his name is Scott, and I was like, "Scott, something needs to change. I cannot do all of the laundry." So,
Yeah.
we're either paying someone to do it or actually, I was like, "No, we're paying someone to do it." And he was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. How about I do half of it?" And I was like, "Done." And that single delegation has opened my world. I have so much more time on my hands, and honestly, sometimes he's like, "How did you do all of it? Half of it is like takes me forever." I'm like, "I know." So, I feel like delegating I used to think of delegating as only businessy things, but I realized that delegating can happen in like any aspect of your life.
Yeah, it's true.
I would say the other delegating thing that I'm doing in like the caregiving realm is preschool. My youngest is 4 and she is in preschool and it is such a game changer. She's literally there right now. That's how I'm recording this without her coming in every 5 seconds and telling me about her bracelet or her crayon or whatever.
Shout outs to the preschool for making the podcast happen.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. So okay, so then if you think about your overall workflow and like your overall podcasting workflow, actually maybe Tally, you want to talk more about like client and team operations?
Yeah, we can jump to that. And I
Yeah.
know that you said that you're just now like really starting to grow that side of your business, getting multiple clients. I would love to hear a little bit of like when a new client comes in, how do you help them like what's the process that you have right now where you're getting them in and you're trying to figure out like what's the best workflow for them because not every workflow works for everyone. So I'm curious just to hear a little bit of how you've managed that part of your business.
Definitely. Okay, so it's been interesting. I my main thing is I help podcasters grow their show, but I also will help people start their podcasts. I don't do that quite as much these days, but um that is where I've seen the most like variation in podcasters. It like there are some podcasters that I've helped start their podcast that they want to batch a month's worth of episodes and then not think about it for the entire month. And then I have another podcaster client who that felt so overwhelming that she almost was like, "I'm just not going to do this anymore." And I was like, "Hi, there are other options." Like you don't have. So for her, batching actually looked like picking a specific day where she did podcast stuff because she was also a business owner. So batching for her was batching all of her podcast stuff in one day instead of batching all of her episodes in one like week or however she wanted to do that. So I feel like the workflow looked very different for the girl who wanted to batch. That was like, okay, so on week 1 you're going to write all of your scripts. On week 2 you're going to record all your scripts. And that's how I do it and that's how I love it. But obviously that's not for everyone. For the girl who just wanted to do all of her podcasts, like create the episode and have it come out 2 days later, that looked very different. For her, it was more like the workflow, her podcasting workflow had to work with her business workflow overall. And so for her, she just had a day that was her podcast day. And I feel like it's interesting to kind of parse that out and see what works best, not only for different types of podcasters, but also just different personalities, like what's going to work best for them and what feels best for them.
100%.
Yes.
I was just gonna add in too, though, I feel like it matters the type of show that you have, right? Because if
Yeah.
you have like a solo podcast and your episodes are 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever, to sit down and batch 3 or 4 of them, you block an hour and a half, or whatever it is, and you get them all done, right? But if you're doing guest interviews, to do 7 of them a week or 10 of them a week or something like that is a lot of energy and it's a lot of content, to put out there. But there's an interesting stat, and normally Tally is the queen of stats on the podcast, but I'm this one in, that podcasters who batch episodes are actually 2.5 times more likely to stay consistent long term. So if the goal is growth, if the goal is to be consistent, anything you can do in advance to plan ahead, so key, I think, in my opinion.
Yes. Yes.
I
And
couldn't agree more. I love
and go
batching.
yeah. And I guess I could mention two things here. One is like one of the things that we notice like on as we're talking to different agency and creators overall working on Northflow was that planning was a big deal. Like a lot of them are really into batching, so we actually created a whole like system based on that. Like we have a whole feature just focused on planning. But also going back another one of the other things you were talking about like how every client is different. One thing that I'm always like hearing from different creators and agency owners, especially, is exactly that. Like, well, I can always have the same workflow for everyone. So, it is very important to be flexible enough where whenever you're getting a new client, you are not just putting them in the workflow that you think works best for you, but also giving them that flexibility. And that's another thing too. Like on Northflow, we have the option of for you to create different templates based on the different clients that you have. So this way, whenever you're creating a new episode for them or just a different project overall, you can just use one of those templates and you don't have to be thinking like, okay, so this client usually does this and that, that client does that. It's all there for you. So just wanted to highlight that real quick. Now, going more into like the content and strategy growth, we were talking about like how, like some clients are different than the others, and we talked about batch recording. But I'm also curious, like, how do you guide clients to create content that aligns with like their business goal, right? And also like the part, like going back to Pinterest, how do you approach like, hey, you need to be using Pinterest? Or did they come to you already knowing like Andi is the Pinterest queen? So I'm going to her because I know I can count on her to get me viral on Pinterest.
Truly, I will say I'm slowly converting podcasters to Pinterest. I'm not gonna lie. Not at the no,
Well, you
not
got
everyone.
me. I'm going to
I'm
get
so
there
glad.
now.
I'm so glad. But I am definitely still helping people understand how awesome Pinterest can be, which truly I feel like it's not a bad place to be because I would love to get as many podcasters on Pinterest as possible, but the earlier adopters are going to get more traction when there's less podcasters on there. So it's kind of fun to be like, "Hi, there aren't that many podcasters on there right now, but it is a really good spot for podcasters. So hop in early if you can, like if this works for you." And I forgot the other half of your question. I apologize.
No, it was just like how do you align their business goals with also being
Mm.
able to get them to repurpose their content on Pinterest?
Totally. Okay, so What when I'm first starting with a client, so I have kind of like I have a do it yourself course, but then I also have like a done for you where I will help set up your Pinterest for you and all of that stuff. So for the done for you clients, we do a call at the first where I'm like, "Hi. Okay. So what's the goal? Who are we trying to reach and how are they searching for you?" We're going to make sure all of that is in your Pinterest profile, all of that's in your boards, and then when I'm first creating pins for them, like, I create the first 30 days of their pins, and then if they want me to keep doing it, I can, or if they're like, "Cool, I get it now," great. But I will take usually their top performing episodes, like 4 or 5 of their top performing episodes and be like, "Okay, these are the ones that are getting you clients. These are the ones that are getting you listens. These are the ones that we want to get on Pinterest first." And so then I'll get those from them and then create those pins so that they can see it working because we already know those episodes are resonating with their people. So let's just get them to a new audience that hasn't seen them before on Pinterest.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit earlier about how important it is to grow the show, right? And tap into the SEO side and tap into, the Pinterest side. And it's a different way of marketing, which I absolutely love. How does Pinterest and SEO tie in together? And how does that impact the overall growth of the show? And if you have any specific like client examples or examples on like for your own show, and even like ways to track that, is that like do you track it through like Google Analytics? Like what's
Hmm.
the way of doing that,
Totally. Okay. So
3-part question. Let me see. Let's do it.
Let's see if I can remember all
want to
three.
add another one, but
I know.
wait.
Okay, I love it. Okay, so how do you track, like, I'm going to start with like Pinterest and like how to track it differently than social media because it is a little bit different. So especially when you're starting with Pinterest, your like views, impressions, that's what they call them. I'm pretty sure. I feel like they change the names all the time, but it means the same thing. Your views are going to be lower than on Instagram or TikTok when you first start Pinterest, but Pinterest users just like a podcast listener is different than a social media follower. Like they're more invested, they're actually listening. So a listen is worth way more than a like on social media.
Mhm.
I would say a Pinterest view or a Pinterest click or save is maybe not to the level of podcast listener, but it's definitely higher than a social media like or comment. Just because the people that are clicking, they're clicking because they want to learn more. They're not just liking it because it was a pretty picture. So
Mhm.
I feel like in that sense, Pinterest, the way that you track it is a little bit, maybe you just have to take it with a grain of salt that no,
Yeah.
you know, you're not going to get a minimum of 200 views on your pins when you're first starting like you usually do on Instagram, but every view that you get is worth at least a little bit more than an Instagram view
That makes
as
a lot
far
of
as
sense.
Pinterest goes.
So then as people are finding the content, they're doing so through whatever keywords they're searching, right? So is it kind of the
Yes.
same idea as when you have a podcast episode and you need to make sure like, if you know like I know you know this specifically, but for our listener right now, that when you are tapping into podcast SEO, you really want to make sure that there's keywords in the title, keywords in the first, paragraph, the keywords that are in, embedded throughout the episode, show notes, for example, are there. Is it kind of the same idea here?
Totally. So
Okay.
SEO, like the Pinterest version of SEO, so Pinterest SEO, is very similar. I would say, so when you're setting up your podcast and you figure out what your SEO keywords are, if you haven't, you should. And I do have an episode about that that's like 5 minutes long that you can go listen to. It's not very long. But if you haven't done that yet, cool, go do that. Then once you've done that and you have your SEO keywords, if you have no time, then just use those. If you have an extra 20 minutes, then I would put each of those SEO keywords into Pinterest to see if there's a tweaked version of them that will do better on Pinterest. And then take those and sprinkle them everywhere in your Pinterest profile, in your boards, titles, in your pin titles, in your pin descriptions. And that will help your people find you faster because you're using the language that they're using on Pinterest. So yes, SEO is it's a big part of people finding you on Pinterest, just like everywhere else, I feel like.
Yes, and I was trying to like I need to have at least one stat to share. So I was looking here. Just I have to have a number. Over 550 million monthly active users globally on Pinterest. So it's if you're not on Pinterest, you definitely need to listen to Andy and go pin some of your podcast content there or for your client as well.
Totally.
Yes. So as we start to wrap up, I would love for you to share like top three actionable key takeaways that if they're not on Pinterest that they should do. Whatever you think though, would be valuable for our current listeners right now. I would love for you to share that.
Okay, so if you haven't ever done Pinterest before, if that's where we're
Mhm.
starting, I would say set up your Pinterest, have a business account, not a personal account. If you have a business account, you get all of the stats. You want that so that you know which pins are resonating with your people. So that would be the first thing. Set up your Pinterest account with and make it a business account. The next thing would be just start dabbling in pins. Okay. Just make a couple and see how it feels, see how it's not nearly as hard as you probably thought it was. And but before you post any of them, upload any of them, figure out what your rhythm is going to be. Like I was talking about earlier with I was just doing one a week. Pinterest likes consistency. So don't be like, okay, I'm just going to go all in and do, 10 pins in the first week, but then you're like, oh no, I don't have any more. Don't do that.
That's something I would
Just
do.
this is advice for you, Simona.
I'm listening
Just
intently.
schedule them out. So like you've made your 10 and you're like, you know what? I think I could do 2 per week. That's where I'm going to start. So schedule out your 10 for every Tuesday and Thursday for the next month and a week. Is that math is not my strong suit. But yeah, however long. Then you've got, that many pins already out. And then when you're ready to go a little bit more and maybe add a third pin, Pinterest isn't going to get mad at you for adding more. But if you take a break, your views will go down a little bit. But truly, I will say, unlike other social media platforms, Pinterest won't penalize you quite as much as
Okay.
other social media.
They're
Like
a bit
it's
more forgiving.
yes, they are much more forgiving in my experience, honestly, because I feel like I got really into Pinterest and then I don't even remember what happened. Something happened and I just didn't pin for like probably 2 months straight. It was probably a kid thing. Let's be real. And then I was like, you know what? I got to get back on. So that's when I started doing 1 pin a week. And then I've upped it from there. But having that consistency, Pinterest is like, oh, she's sticking around and she's creating good content. So let's show other people what's going on. I think that was
Okay.
3 takeaways. That feels
I
like 3
love that.
takeaways.
Those were really good.
Can I ask you one really, really, really quick thing? And I think Tally also has something really quick. But if you look back over all the years that you've been doing this and, in the industry and so on, what is one workflow that you would have implemented on day one to save yourself the most time, the most amount of stress, and so on, especially when it comes to a podcast and Pinterest?
Yes. Okay. So the thing that I would have started immediately that I didn't do until last year is having a seasonal podcast, taking intentional breaks. We haven't even talked about this at all, but this is one, like literally, I totally burned out a year and a half ago. And I was like, am I even going to podcast anymore? Like, this is too much. I can't handle this. And I took the summer off. I told my people, I was like, hey, I'm taking a break. I'll be back in the fall, thinking I don't actually know if I'm going to be back in the fall, but that's what I'm saying so that people know what's happening. And took the summer off and I was like, oh, I just needed a break. Like, I still love podcasting. I just needed a break. Took that break and it's been heaven ever since. So my current seasonal workflow, I guess we could call it, is 3 months on, 3 months off. So
Nice.
I have a fall season and I have a spring season and I
I
take
love
winter and summer off. And it's been exactly what I needed. And I
I love
haven't
that.
lost listeners. If anything, I've actually gained listeners because my content is better because I take
Mm-hmm.
my breaks.
Exactly. I have another podcast separate to this one called As It Relates to Podcasting, where I dive into all things podcasting
I
and
love
just
that.
did, thank you, and just did a 10-week podcast launch series. And
Ooh.
that was so targeted and it was so specific that it actually has had like really good results. But, the other thing too, as you're talking, I'm like, well, it's such a good thing that Northflow has a planning tool that you can plan out all of your seasons and all of this content. You could plan it for the whole next 2 years if you wanted to. Go ahead, Tally.
That's true. That's true. No, I was just going to agree with you. You're right.
I love that. Andy, is there any final things that you want to share with our listener today? Any final insight before we end our interview today?
Truly, I will say, even after I tell people how awesome Pinterest is, they usually aren't completely convinced, which is understandable because, like Tali said, usually Pinterest, you think of recipes and crafts, right? And I understand that. So I actually have like a free checklist that's called Is Pinterest Right for Me? to help you know if Pinterest is actually right for you. And it takes like 2 minutes. You just go through it and you're like, oh, wow. Okay. Actually, this would be a really good fit for me in my podcast. So I will give you guys the link so you can share it with your people because I get it. Pinterest is not the first thing you think of when you think of marketing. But honestly, I wish it was because it's just such a great tool.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Andy, and thank you so much for your time today. It has been so wonderful chatting with you, learning about Pinterest, all of the things that you have to share with our listener, with our audience. There's so much value here. So I hope that people can see that and kind of hear that and take something from today and implement it in in their overall workflow.
We can say if they do one pin, that's a win.
I
Oh my gosh,
love
yes, I love
that.
that. I love that rhyme. Yes, please.
I love rhyming things, even though that was not intentional.
That was a really good one. If we see that in any of Andy's marketing, credits come back to Tally at
Yes,
Northflow.
I will credit every
Just
time I
Roast
use
kidding.
me.
it.
Trademark that, register it. That's so funny. Andy, thank you so much. We'll put the link to the guide in the episode notes below. And where is the best place for our listener to connect with you?
Truly, first of all, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. I love talking to podcasters. We are just so much fun. So here we are.
You're so fun.
The best place to find me truly is Threads. I love Threads so much.
That's how I found you.
Second, oh, really? Oh,
For
yeah.
this,
That's how we
remember?
did.
I
How
put a call for
cute.
interviews out, and I know we're connected on Instagram, but we connected on Threads as well, and then scheduled in the interview. So it works, friends.
That's
It
true.
works.
See, Threads. I I don't really post on Instagram at the moment, but I do hop on stories pretty regularly just because that's how I like to connect with my people, and posting just feels like too much right now. So
Yeah.
Threads and Pinterest, obviously, is probably, and then of course my podcast, I guess, if you want to go listen to an episode. And my episodes are really short because I don't like making long episodes. So they're usually
Perfect.
about like 10 minutes tops. I don't like a long episode. So if you
I
want
love
short,
that.
sweet, doable stuff, my podcast is a good spot for that.
It's amazing. I love that. There's one podcast that I used to listen to. I actually don't even know if it's on the air or not anymore, but it's one that I used to listen to years ago. It was one of my favorite podcasts. It was called Make Your Damn Bed. And the episodes were literally 5 minutes or less in the amount of time it takes you to make your bed. And there was always like just tiny little insights of information. And I always thought, I'm like, man, it was a daily podcast too. But I thought to myself, I'm
Dang.
like, how easy is that though, to batch record a whole ton of them,
Yeah.
schedule them all out in advance, and then there's your content for the month. So I thought that was really cool. But anyways, love that. And we will put all of your links in the notes below. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. And thank you to our listener for tuning in with us today. Remember to go and check out Northflow. The link for that is in the episode notes below. You can go in, you can create an account, you can plan your seasons, your series, you can get all organized, and you can even create your content workflow in there. So definitely go and check that out. Link is in the notes below. And thank you. And we will see you same time, same place. Bye for now.
Bye.